Maharata current, or the inner Christos current. We're going to learn processes that will culminate into being able to use something called a Maharic recoding process, which means we're going to be doing core template recoding using the D12 Divine Blueprint. The manual that you have, the Kathara manual, if you'll notice, there are 2 sets of page numbers in this manual. The first run along the bottom of the pages, and the second are only on some pages that are up. Okay, if you don't have them here, they say you're getting them tomorrow. You'll notice in these manuals, I'll explain what it is now anyway, there are 2 sets of page numbers. This is because this is not only a course where you're going to learn about this, it's also a teacher's course, which means this book will enable you to do what I'm doing right now, which is to teach a course in Kathara healing. The first set of page numbers are the sequential page numbers of all of the text. The second set of page numbers that you will find in the upper right-hand corner at the top are a sequence that if you pull those out of the text and make a set of transparencies, they will give you the highlights of each chapter. And that is the most important information in each chapter, and it gives you all the graphs and those kind of things. So you will be able to, without too much difficulty, read the book, pull out those pages to make a set, like I actually make a set of transparencies and a set of paper copies of those transparencies. So you'll end up with a small book that is your teaching manual. So you can actually take this course and then go on to teach what you're learning. So it's not just, that way you're not dependent on us. You can become an independent Kathara teacher and healing facilitator. Yet by the end of Kathara Level 1, which I think we're going to probably finish up either tomorrow or early Sunday, depending on how fast we move with the material, because there's also the intro to Kathara Level 2 that you're going to get here. By the end of Kathara Level 1, you will be able to not only run the D12 current within your own template to begin clearing your own Kathara grid level. You also learn a process by which you can do client sessions, which means you can take this process, learn to use the processes in your body, and then do hands-on type spiritual healing facilitation is what we call it. When we talk about healing, the way it was always taught and what we teach in the Azurite Temple is you are not a healer to anybody but yourself. All right? What you can be, however, is a very good healing facilitator, which means you will help the D12 Christos avatar level of your client to orchestrate healing by helping their higher parts to ground the frequency. So I've met people in the healing professions that get this egomania. I'm a healer. I paid $10,000 for my certification and I'm so important. Oh, spare me. It's like, you're not going to get anywhere with that attitude. And I don't think, I can feel this with the consciousness in this room. This is a very high consciousness room, and you guys are going to be fun to work with. I don't think that's going to be a problem for the people in this room. But if you catch that with other people doing healing facilitations, just know it's a red flag as far as how good they really are at whatever it is they think they're doing. All right? You'll get to the point where you don't need to have an ego identification that, oh, I'm important now because I'm a healer. This is where people come from when they need to do that. You will learn that everybody is important. Everybody is an avatar trying to wake up. Once you know that you're blessed, once you know you are a spiritual being that's important, unique, and valued completely as literally an expressed face of God, you don't need an ego superiority complex to compensate for your inferiority complex. Okay? People that need to go spouting about how important they are the people that feel most pathetic inside of themselves. They really feel that they are worthless and worth nothing. So they create a personality construct to counteract that, where they go overboard with self-inflated importance in order to make their inner self feel better, so they feel like they have a purpose and a meaning. You'll run into people in all walks of life like that. And one of the saddest ones are the ones that are in the spiritual professions and within the healing professions. Because what they are doing is misunderstanding the whole process, which means they can't use it very well. So we're going to learn things as we go along about the attitudes that go along with healing facilitation, where you'll be more proud of yourself being a healing facilitator than you ever would if you call yourself a healer. You will be a healer of yourself, And the part of yourself that you're going to use is your own D12 consciousness. When you run D12 current through your body, what you are doing is beginning the process of bringing your avatar consciousness and its frequency into your body. It'll take a while before your identity will start to change. You will start to really begin to know yourself as an avatar. What that means is you first of all give yourself permission to not be afraid of your own greatness. Some of us go overboard on the humility aspect, where, oh, I'm just a pathetic, lowly little being, and I'm just humble in service to God, and I'm a martyr, and that kind of stuff. That's as bad as the other. Both of them are missing the point that you are a blessed being, you are an avatar. As you grow to become an avatar and begin to healing facilitate like an avatar would, you will start to love yourself. And that is allowed. In our societies, we're taught to never look at ourselves as good enough, to always feel something's wrong with us where we didn't quite make the grade, we weren't pretty enough, we weren't smart enough, we weren't intelligent enough, we weren't rich enough, we weren't in the right place at the right time enough. You'll find that you are enough. You'll find that you are absolutely lovable right now exactly how you are, even if you don't have the job you'd like to have ideally, even if you're in a body that's too skinny or too fat or too old or too young for whatever it is you think you'd like to create. You will learn to accept yourself and love yourself as you are. And that is a gift you will bring to any clients who come to you for facilitation. You can only give to another person what you have inside of you to begin with. Think about that in terms of frequency. If you're an energy pattern and all the good stuff and the confused stuff that you carry around inside of you, that's your energy pattern. When you begin to run energy as a healing facilitator to assist others, you are giving them a part of that pattern temporarily. Now, you're not going to give them your energy signature, but your energy signature will affect their thought field. If you come in with low self-esteem, you will be giving them a kick in their own low self-esteem. If you come in with ego issues, you'll be giving them a kick in their own ego issues. So a true healing facilitator realizes that in order to be the best they can possibly be, they must really be the best. You can't fake it. And people will know, even if they don't know here. There's a lot of people that run healing scams. You see a lot of this under the guise of Christianity, which is really pathetic. I know one person, bless her, she does workshops, and she does the breath of the Holy Spirit. And she goes up and calls a person out of the audience. Of course, she talked to them before and paid them a little on the side. And she does her incantation thing and then goes, and blows on their forehead. And they fall down, right? And they kind of bounce around on the floor for a while, and then they get up and, oh, I'm cured. My leg is fixed, or my head is fixed, or I know I don't have my cancer anymore. And this person runs this, and there's people that pay her huge amounts of money to go to her workshops. And I went to one just to see, because she happened to be giving one at the same time I was. And I sat in there, and I'm watching this lady. I'm watching her biofields, which is something you'll learn to do. You'll learn to switch to D4 vision and say, okay, what are they really doing? What are they really running? She couldn't run anything more than three-dimensional current. She was just faking. This isn't what you want to be. And none of you, I think I could feel, there's a vibe, none of you would want to be that. You'd be ashamed of yourself if you were. So you would never let yourself do that. But there are people out there. There might be people you know. There might be people that have done healing work on you because you thought that they could help you with something. They may have brought to you things into your energy fields that you didn't want, that you didn't know they brought. Some of them won't even know that they brought those things into your field. When you work with the Kathara healing program, as we're going to work, you're going to learn what it means to have integrity as a healing facilitator. If a person doesn't know dimensional structure, they're not going to know what currents they're running. If they're not knowing what currents they're running, they're not going to know what they're doing in energy. So they assign it to somebody up there that will help them. Maybe it's God, maybe it's the Holy Spirit, maybe it's Archangel Gabriel. Maybe it's one of those ET things. You never know, because people don't know where the energy is coming from when they're doing healing facilitation, unless they've had exposure to primal structure teachings. You will know what primal order is. It will put you in a category of healing facilitators that is a new category. It's the resurrection, the carrying of the torch and the relighting of the torch of what was once the old, ancient way of the angelic human. You'll be like a first generation of the torchbearers coming back again, resetting the pattern of integrity in the healing practice. Now, it's going to be a journey. for everyone. If you get lost tonight, which I don't think you will, but just in case, because I'm going to probably I'll go at a moderate rate. If I go at a really fast rate, I'll lose everybody, including myself. So with this stuff, because this stuff I like to take these subjects kind of slow and piece by piece, because if you run through them fast, like I tend to talk when I get on a flow, it's like it goes by so fast, your ears heard it and it went out the other side, and it didn't stop anywhere in between, so you don't get it. So I will try to take these subjects in a moderate pace. You'll probably find by tomorrow evening, as I'm trying to calculate how we're going to fit the new material that's been being given over the weekend to add to the Kathara 2 that wasn't originally supposed to be part of this workshop, but since it's being given now, I want to give it to you. You'll find my pace pick it up. Where you may find me going, but when that happens, it will already be, we started at this pace, your consciousness will move with mine. When I give workshops, I'm transmitting frequency as well as transmitting words. The funny thing is, everybody's transmitting frequency when they transmit words, but most people just don't know it. It happens subconsciously. The information contained in Kathara healing goes anywhere from D4 frequency up into about D9 frequency. So you will find when things accelerate, you'll find that we're picking up. We started at D4 information, and it started to go faster. Then things got faster, and they started to go up to D7, and then we're at D9, and you're like out there, but you're still getting it, right? You're still getting it. And then we come back down, like go home for the night or do break, come back and go, what did I just get? What did we talk about an hour ago? I don't remember. Right? This is because when you are in a workshop that is doing an upscale in frequency, your DNA is responding to that frequency. I'm transmitting frequency. When Az speaks, he's transmitting frequency to you. You're listening, and your DNA is listening. That frequency triggers little temporary activations in your DNA template. That's what allows you to understand. If I was saying something at a real high frequency that your DNA couldn't temporarily activate enough to pick up, you wouldn't even hear me. I'd be just like lip syncing. You wouldn't even hear sound coming out of my mouth. So your DNA is going to be taking this workshop with you, which means you're going to have temporary little DNA activations that will take you up maybe into 4th strand activation, or at least most people are on the 3rd strand activation right now, moving into 4th. What this will do is go into the subharmonics. If we're doing D7 information, the 7th out of 12 subharmonic will be activating in your first 3 strands. If we go up to D8 transmission, the 8th subharmonic will be activating. Because right now, if your full 8th strand activated to keep up with it, you'd blow up. Because you have to get your body cells used to the frequency. But what will happen with this, and don't think it's strange, when we're speaking and going through the workshop, you may be surprised. Well, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. Yeah, I'm getting it. I didn't know if I would get that, but yeah, I'm getting it. And then you go home, and you find you don't got it at all. It's like, where did it go? I must have left it under my chair in the workshop room, because you can't for the life of you remember things you knew made sense to you when you were in the workshop. I want you to know about this ahead of time so you don't pick on yourself or think anything's wrong. What happens is the subharmonics in your DNA that activated to allow that frequency to come in, so you did understand there, well, the frequency is not being transmitted into the room you're in anymore. So the DNA goes back to its usual level. Now, eventually, your DNA will stay there, and so will the awareness, where you'd be able to run it off, like I run it off now, a lot of it off the top of my head, because I got it, I've integrated it, it's embedded in my DNA now. But until it gets embedded through critical mass of being exposed to the frequency and the information, you will find that when the frequency stops coming at you from the outside, you'll go back to where you were before, and only pieces of the information will stick. But then the next time, more pieces will stick. And the more you read the book, more pieces will stick. So don't feel that... I guess I'm telling you that to try to overcome the confusion that can happen, that it made sense to you before and then all of a sudden you lost it. A lot of people have really kind of gone, I'm really bummed. I'm really upset. I thought I understood something, but now I don't. I'm all confused. If you feel confused after the fact, consider that normal. That's just my DNA template. Okay. It'll come back into activation more. Once you're not in a workshop, the books, the written material, hold those same frequencies. That's why we go to painstaking detail into these things and putting it all down on paper in as greatest detail as we can. Because every detail, every word, every letter, every sentence carries more of the frequency bridge that will stimulate, when you read it, your DNA template that will allow you to hold the information more until you can hold it permanently in your biofield. So I wanted to let you know about that. And I also wanted to let you know a cue as to when we're going into higher spaces, when I start to talk really fast. I'm learning to modulate that so it doesn't happen. But I tend to just go and let my Holy Spirit part of me move through. And I don't think about controlling how I'm speaking. I just speak. So you'll notice when we start to go faster, that's that little cue she said. We're going into higher strand activation, subharmonic activations here. So just be aware of it. I will try to be sensitive to you. Now, we're going to get into subject matter, and I'm going to purposely slow down just a bit. The context of healing. This is the framework, the structure of the unified field, and the multidimensional anatomy of form. That doesn't mean just your body form. It means all form. What we're going to talk about in this section are several things. One thing called the holographic template. Another, the structure of dimensions. Something called Partakai phasing, which I have to move really slowly with words through that. And I read it right off the text, because if I don't, I will lose all of us. Then matter density. These are the key things that make the bridge in your mind so you can understand how things go from being in a non-manifest state to how they literally, rationally, there's a real process here by which they come into a densified state. So you'll learn that. And again, these were in the Bible. I'd like to send a copy to the Pope and say, would you mind teaching this? Yeah, right. This one. Universal and planetary Kathara grids. The 12-tree Kathara centers and lines, scalar shields, crystal seals, and diotic points. Now, these are the primary pieces of universal anatomy that translate absolutely directly into your personal anatomy as well. The universe has them, the galaxies have these anatomy parts, the planets and stars have those parts, and so does your body and the body of anything else in manifest form. So in this section, we're going to explore these things on the universal level, so we understand the context. This applies to the macrocosm and the microcosm. We get into the universal and internal Templar complexes, which Templar refers to the temple pillar, the temple of spirit, and the pillar of primal life force current, or spirit or God that moves through you and creates the vehicle of the three-dimensional manifestation, Templar. Templar applies to your personal inner Templar, and it applies to the planetary Templar, galactic, universal Templar. So Templar mechanics are what we're learning here. These will go into eventually, by the end of this course, what's called Merkaba mechanics. But this is Merkaba like you've never had it taught. There's a couple other Merkaba teachers out there. And, well, let's just say there are little Merkaba vehicles and there are big ones. We're going to teach you about the big ones because they direct the little ones. We'll teach you what Merkaba really is, because that word gets bounced around all over the place in the New Age movement. And I've had a few people say, okay, I've done this. I've been doing Merkaba exercises from so-and-so for like 3 years now. What is Merkaba really? They've been doing the exercises, but nobody taught them exactly what it is. Merkaba is a word that people have been using in the New Age movement falsely to say, oh, it's just a vehicle of light and sound that ascended masters can use to move from one dimension to another, as if only ascended masters have Merkaba vehicles. They fail to tell you that Merkaba fields and Merkaba vehicles are an intrinsic part of all matter structures. They're in your DNA as well as surrounding your body. So what we're going to learn here is going to take us by the end of this course to where we understand what Merkaba really is and how to use it. Because Merkaba mechanics, Merkaba healing is one of the most powerful forms of healing when it's based on Kathara healing. Now, Kathara implies using the divine blueprint, the D12 divine blueprint, and the currents associated with it. When you combine that with true knowledge of Merkaba, you come out with some very, very powerful healing technologies. We won't talk about Merkaba much here, but we will by the end of this course. we'll probably, I'm going to try to get you from here to here, which is basically in the textbook from page like 1 to 47 on the lower numbers. We'll see. If I have to break early, depending on how much I get into these, and I try to feel out how much I need to talk on each one, depending on the feel of the room. I can feel if people are getting lost and confused. It's like a tension feeling that goes like a wave that comes up to me and goes, help. So if I feel that, and I can feel like blank spots, like, you have like everybody's here like little lights lighted up, and you get to a point where you're going out of their space, where you're confusing people, and they start to go off like light bulbs. Uh-oh, losing them. So if I have to go slowly, and it's going to be for the average, frequency that's coming from the room, so everybody has a chance. The ones that could get it really fast and the ones that'll take a while. You're all avatars trying to wake up. All right, you're all loved and blessed, and you're the same. You may be at a different level of understanding at the moment, but you're all at the same level of pure and perfect potential as avatars. So that will be respected, and we will find the average mean to try to serve both. Okay, if I have to break, I would probably break here, because this is the tough part, getting this across. Now, if I can get this across, this stuff comes in pretty easy. Now, there's a level of detail in the manual that when you get your manuals, you'll find the level of detail is painstaking on some of it. Where it not only teaches you about a Kathara grid, but it goes into like all these minute little pieces of it, things that I still have to go back to, because they're things that we won't use directly here, but it helps to know that they exist. I'm not going to take 20 minutes to cover these things. I'll let you know. I'll say like, okay, this is part of this, this is part of this. We're going to use this, just so you know that's there. But that stuff, if you want to learn more about it, it'll be in your text. But as far as the important things that are going to get you by tomorrow to be able to begin the hands-on process, because probably somewhere around tomorrow afternoon, I think, we will be ready to begin the hands-on process where we're not just learning about the structure. We start to run frequency in our bodies. We start to do technique. And that's the body of the course. It helps a lot to understand what you're doing when you do technique. So you don't just think, oh, it's another meditation to run frequency. I've got millions of those out there in the New Age movement. You'll know exactly what these techniques are for. So when you do them, you'll do them with conviction, because you'll know you're doing something important within your body systems. Tomorrow afternoon, I hope to start that process. So in the meantime, I'm going to try to get you through these. Chapter 1, which is the context, ends with something called the transduction sequence and holographic reality construction. Creation mechanics is another way to phrase that. This is a very, very introductory, really it's a chart that shows you the process by which units of consciousness form progressively through various stages and structures of primal order into what we call the manifest hologram of reality. Now, we will just touch on that as we move through the end of Chapter 1. When we get to Chapter 2, that's when the fun starts, when we start to find out where our Kathara grids are located, and where these energy centers are in our body, and how they all interact with each other. So we get some functional control and understanding over our own body vehicles. The new information that I'd mentioned a little bit before, that isn't part of the Kathara manual yet. It's literally, they were giving it to me all day. Actually, I was getting it all day in transmission. It's going to be added to the intro to Kathara 2 that's already in the manual. We will cover that, I hope. I'm going to have to make time for that, which usually isn't in the workshop framework schedule because this is all new. But I want to bring it to you because it picks up where this leaves off with a transduction sequence, and it gets into the mechanics of manifestation in its basic terms, but literally to the point where we're talking about quarks moving into muons and mesons and moving into electrons and protons and building up into things we call matter and how that works in the body and how that works in relation to Merkaba and the DNA template. So when we touch on this, just remember, there's more to come on that stuff at the end. What it's going to be, I don't even know. I mean, it feels like there's probably 100 more pages of this, which I won't have time to get down here. So you'll at least get the most important aspects of it, because there will be 2 more techniques that are going to be brought to you that aren't in the manual yet, and they have to do with something called Veka codes. Now, Veka codes are extremely important parts of the Kathara technology that we were only just given information on starting in September. Since September, the group in Sarasota, Florida, has been given, one at a time, 6 different mathematical code programs to work with advancing healing in the body. And there's not been any text given. We've been given the symbols and a basic explanation of how to use them and what they're for, knowing they're important, but realizing there's a whole tome of information about why these are important. We're beginning to get that tome of information. We're beginning to get an understanding of the Vecca codes, how they apply to Merkaba, how that applies to Kathara, and how we can begin to use it. Because they are the most powerful technologies that are available when combined with the Kathara grid technologies, they're using them in Florida now. So I didn't want to come up here and not be able to give them to you. But instead of just giving you how to use the exercises, we're also getting the whole, what they mean and what it's all about. So that's what's at the end that I'm going to, I'm making room to put into the book. And as long as Kinko's or Staples cooperates, and I get this in written form fast enough to get it printed and everything, you'll have the printed matter as well. But you will be learning Vecca code techniques as well as the end of Kathara 2. So you didn't end up with people down in the States using Vecca codes and you've never heard of them. I wanted to keep you up to speed. So what I'm saying is you're going to learn more in this Kathara class than the first Kathara class is learned when Kathara first came out. Okay, we can go to the next one, please.
I wasn't minded to bring 20. Yeah, I know it's a relief. I wasn't minded to bring 20 cents to the Vecca code class.
Yeah, 20?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I will.
Good. I'll talk about it, when we get into those.
Yeah.
There we go. Now this is the part I will read to you and then explain what that meant. Okay. It's a little... Can we twist that just a little left? Thank you. Yeah. Just over that way. Yeah. Just so the type is straight. Yeah, I can read better if the type is straight. Okay. Now, I think the easiest way to do this, and this is how I've always done it when I've taught these parts, and I'll recommend it to anybody who's planning to teach this. If you're going to, at some point, decide, okay, I'm going to go teach a Kathara workshop. These are put this way, where you can see the big letters, the big paragraphs up there, so you can read it to people and then fill in and describe more of it, because it helps. It helps orient your brain as to the small detail, and it also helps to get people oriented. Plus, what you started talking about, they can go back and look at in their own text if they get lost somewhere in the process. So I will start by reading it, and then I will fill in more of what that means. All right? Now, so the holographic template, that is the template upon which the hologram of matter is manifest. You're part of the hologram of matter, and so is everything else that you perceive. What's very interesting is it's all stationary. Space and time don't actually move. Time doesn't move forward. It actually just all sits in the same place. But it appears to move because of the interaction of energy through the fixed templates of matter. Now, external reality is a holographic projection. Perception of solidity and externalization are determined by the oscillation rates, movement rates. We have vibration and oscillation of waves. By the oscillation rates between dimensionalized units of consciousness. Dimensionalized units of consciousness that are called partikai, particay, and particum. These are particles that science doesn't know are there yet. They're actually pre-particles. They're things that happen before what we call particles happen. I've met one physicist that is dealing with some underground collective of physicists in the States, and they just gave me the creeps because of the, let's say, secrecy that they're playing with. Were aware of particum. That word, they were aware of it. I thought it was a word that was just given with these texts. They're doing some kind of research that has to do with trying to figure out how to do time travel that has to do with particum units. What they didn't know was that particay and partikai go with them, which was kind of interesting. So these are not imaginary particles that we just made up words for. They are actual units of consciousness that exist as the first foundation building blocks that all the other structures that build up to matter are composed of. All right. Dimensionalized units of consciousness form frequency bands. Bands of frequency, like the frequency that carries your radio waves or your TV waves. So, dimensionalized units of consciousness, partikai, particay, and particum, create frequency bands that exist in specific relationship to each other. So there is a specific order and relationship to frequency bands within universal order. We perceive as solid the frequency bands that exist one full dimensional band below the frequencies within which the consciousness is stationed. That means what we're perceiving here as physically solid, if we are at strand 3 DNA template activation, our consciousness is stationed in D3. That means what we're seeing as solid is the unified field and the shapes of energy that are in it that are in D2, dimension 2. This is very interesting because if you want to see what's in dimension 5, it implies you have to go to dimension 6 consciousness, which implies you have to go to 6th DNA strand template activation. So you can process in your body 6th dimensional frequency. So this is the beginning of understanding what consciousness is doing when it perceives, as well as understanding the greater framework that we all exist within to be in a manifest hologram. Okay. Dimensionalization, the process of energy being broken down into dimensions, creates the structure through which consciousness can perceive the hologram of externalization. That means that if consciousness, if Source, if God, didn't create a structure of taking parts of its consciousness and breaking them down and moving them in relationship to each other, creating dimensionalization, if that dimensional structure wasn't created, three-dimensional hologram would not be seen. We would not have the opportunity to perceive externalization, which implies that the real condition of reality is not manifest. It is pure cognition, beyond form. But form and matter and density and time and space are illusions, perceptual illusions, that can take place when consciousness moves itself into certain structures, energy structures. Dimensions allow us to perceive a hologram that's very, very solid when you're focused in it, until you learn to play with it, and it becomes less and less solid, and you realize you're sitting in the middle of a thought form. That gets fun. It takes a while. It's usually about 4.5 strand activation before you can sit in a room and it comes on you, kind of like a breeze, where you start to, did I catch that? Did the walls actually do this for a second? Yes, they did. You're starting to see through the frequency bands that are making up the solid form because your consciousness is jumping up to another level. So you're starting to see that the matter forms are not as solid as they appear when you're fully stationed here. So there's a lot of things that we have to look forward to. Some things that will make our hair stand on end as we're going through. It disappeared. Yes, it did. It came back. Thank goodness. You know, I mean, it can be like the road in front of you when you're driving. You know, which can get real scary. You know? But as long as you know that your avatar consciousness is with you when these things are happening, even if you don't know what to do with it, your avatar does, and you'll be okay. You're being trained, and your consciousness is being stretched. Your perceptions are being stretched through your DNA activating if you start to get weird effects like that. Weird effects are part of the norm when we're expanding our consciousness into multidimensional consciousness back into our avatar selves. Okay. Now, the human body is a hologram. God, I'm so glad to know that. And that means like it's not really as stuck as it seems. Okay, it is a hologram built upon a holographic template of units of consciousness, which are part I, part K, and part M, that are structured into scalar standing wave grids. Scalar standing wave grids. A scalar grid is like a mathematical fixed grid of energy points. You could make a scalar of a map, let's say, by putting a light for each little point on a map. And every little location on that map is a very specific coordinate. It's a coordinate point. It's a scalar. Now, in relation to dimensions, in relation to consciousness and units of consciousness, scalar wave grid means there is, let's say, a template that's made of standing waves of light and sound. A standing wave is a columnar wave. So it's like a column of light when it's turned on that's in a fixed position. The position is fixed by a vibration. Okay? When the vibration undergoes a certain change, it becomes an oscillation, which is different than a vibration. We'll get into that in a minute. When the vibration goes into oscillation, the unit of particle, unit of sound, turns on and becomes a unit of light. When we're talking about scalar standing wave grids, we're talking about a grid. You could look at it as a field of light bulbs that, when they are in their vibrational state, are turned off, like the switch is off. And when they are in their oscillating state, which is the state when the matter hologram flashes on, the switch is thrown, the light bulbs come on. Now, if you ever saw the old marquees that they used to have for theaters and things like that, where you'd have the series of lights, where you'd have light bulbs, and they were all in a fixed position, but they were triggered on a sequence where one would turn on, and then the next one would turn on, and that one would turn off, and they would move in a certain sequence that would make it look as if the light was moving, like a circle of light around the billboard or the marquee that they were trying to highlight. The light bulbs didn't move. They just appeared as if they were moving. What happens in the scalar standing grids that the hologram is built upon? The hologram isn't moving. The lights are shutting off and on in sequence. And what we perceive as linear progression and movement through time is actually the same type of illusion of watching those light bulbs do their thing to make the circle of light moving around a marquee. We're watching scalar standing waves turn off and on, going from vibration, which is a contraction, to oscillation, which is an expansion, going from what's called base magnetic to base electrical, off and on, going from sound off to light on. It is a wave, a unified field of energy that's composed of fixed wave points that consciousness moves itself through. And in moving through those fixed points of waves, it turns some of them on. When the consciousness moves through, the waves turn on, the hologram appears. When the consciousness moves into the next wave and out of that one, the one behind it turns off, becomes memory, and the illusion rolls forward as if you're moving forward in time. It's the consciousness that's actually circulating through a standing wave grid, rather than us moving and our bodies moving from one place to another in time. We're actually all standing still. Okay. So, anyway, I won't take that too much further in this discussion. Okay. All right, can we pull this up just a little, Levy, please? Can we just pull this up just a little, please? Okay. So remember, standing scalar wave grids, that's not too hard to understand, right? Just little light bulbs turning off and on. Okay? If we can understand a grid like a piece of plywood with light bulbs on it, each on a different switch that turns off and on, and they're synchronized. So there's a mathematical program that governs when they turn off and when they turn on to create certain holographic effects. That's what we're in the middle of. That's what we're made of. That is the form that our consciousness takes on. When our consciousness decides to individuate, our consciousness is in a state of at-one-ment with God at all times. And it chooses to take a part of itself into individuation to experience life and dimensionality as me, whoever me is, whatever me you decided you wanted to be when you were coming in. You literally, as pure consciousness, choose to take on the energy form of standing scalar waves in very specific ordered patterns, mathematical geometrical patterns that allow you to experience your holographic world and your holographic body. All right, let's see. Okay, anyway, back to the words. See what I mean by I'll read part of it and then explain that and then go back and read it? It anchors people back into what they can go look that up. What was that again? All right. Okay, so I'll read that all in one sentence so you know what it means now. The human body is a hologram built upon a holographic template of units of consciousness structured into standing scalar wave grids, light bulbs, that represent the living morphogenetic field, form-holding blueprint upon which matter and dimensionalized consciousness manifest. So there's some of the basic things about understanding reality. First of all, you need to realize it's a hologram. Now, the mind and the programming we've been given will tell you, that doesn't make any sense. Holograms aren't real. This is obviously real. If I go stand out in front of a car, I get splattered. That's very real. Yes, it is. Unless you know how to modulate your DNA very quickly and effectively, if you go out and stand in a car in your physical body, unless you blink your physical body out of there and get it out of the same light bulb program that the car is in, you will get flattened. The trick in that situation, and a lot of others, would be to get your body running on a different sequence of light bulbs turning off and on than the car is in, which means you would move from the dimensional time field that you're in into another one in order to avoid the car hitting you. This gives you a clue as to what it means to time travel, what it means to appear and disappear, what it means to activate DNA to a level where you're no longer trapped in a mortal body. It has to do with understanding light bulbs. They're a very good analogy, because if you can remember something that comes easy, that you've known since you were little, and apply that to a big concept, where the big concept is made easy enough through the analogy, it'll stick better in your mind. If you can think of scalar waves as a light bulb grid that turn, with light bulbs turning off and on, that'll help you understand the next part that we're going to get into, which is called flash line sequences. Okay, can we go to the next one, left, please? Okay, now, to understand flash line sequences, we need to understand the light bulb concept. To understand the light bulb concept in a way that we go beyond thinking just light bulbs and glass things around them and little strands of metal inside of them and physical technologies, it will help a little bit to understand what those standing scalar waves, what those light bulbs are made out of, which are the units of part chi, part k, and part cum. This chart, and it's really all summarized very well on this chart. You don't have to be a physicist and know a billion different particle names to understand the foundation units that are most important, because all the other structures are built on them. We have units of consciousness, morphogenetic fields, and scalar grids. The units of consciousness, part chi, part k, part cum, they group to form morphogenetic fields, which are scalar grids. Now, number one here says part chi, part k, and part cum are the smallest units of energy substance. They're primal substance. They are electrotonal, means they have a light electrical frequency equivalent and a tone vibration frequency equivalent. Electrotonal really means they oscillate and vibrate. All right, they have the potentiality to oscillate and vibrate, electrotonal. The electrotonal units of consciousness that are the building blocks of morphogenetic fields. Morphogenetic field would simply be, you could look at it as the thought form field behind a manifest object. It's also a very specific construct that we'll talk about some as we go along and more at the end of the course when we get into understanding something called chelons and morphogenetic fields that actually form a construct of crystallized scalar waves that form what's called the crystal body. Now we get introduced to the word chelons over here. So we have morphogenetic fields, which are the beginning blueprints of matter, that are formed of part chi, part k, and part cum. And the part chi, and it's really the foundation particles that create what's called antimatter. Now, antimatter is a light field. It is not an antimatter. That's a different thing. Out of a part chi unit, the part chi break apart, okay, which means you have one waveform, and actually it's a vibration at this point. It pulses, which means it breaks itself apart and turns, each little wave piece turns itself away from each other, and this is where light is created. You have a part chi, the part chi becomes a part cum unit, which is considered base magnetic or base vibrational, and a part k unit, which is base oscillation. This would be base sound, base pre-sound, base pre-light. This would be matter, base sound, antimatter, base light. This is literally the particle formations that begin the process of taking consciousness, combining units of consciousness into waveforms that progressively build up into the scalar grids that form the templates of matter. Now, secondly, we go from part chi, part k, and part cum units into part chi grids, the fabric of morphogenetic field structure. So if you take bunches of those little guys in their standing fixed form, put bunches of them together following very specific mathematical organization, they form grids of standing scalar waves. But at this point, they are still singular dimensional. They begin to group. Part chi will collect more part chi near them. Part k will collect more part k, and part cum will collect more part cum, and they begin to accrete or pull more of like kind to themselves, to the point where they fill out into grids. Now, these grids are actually preset, and the stages that we talk about, it goes from this to this to this, they're actually stages that all exist at once. They're just different points of phases of development, just like it applies to you as well. Who you are right now, at age whatever you are right now, you are one, let's say, flashed on light bulb. The person you were when you were 10 years old, or the person you were at conception, the person you will be when you pass out of manifestation, whatever way you choose to do that, they all exist right now. Okay? You could say you're like one set of Partakai units, but they're connected to a whole grid. Time works this way. Time and space are intimately connected. You will perceive space-time as your consciousness moves through sets of scalar waves composed of these things. The most important thing to understand for now is that these are the foundation primal substance units that all of the other structures we're going to talk about are created from. So if I say, okay, you have a chakra system and it looks like this, well, what's it made of? It's made of this stuff, primal substance. There are several phases of primal substance where it moves from being Partakai units, singular standing waves, into groups of standing waves that draw toward each other. They become Partakai grids. They draw more of these units of consciousness from source. Now you have to remember, this is all coming from source energy, okay? God, source, whatever you want to call that, primal force of intelligence that always exists. Send streams of consciousness into this framework, and those streams of consciousness first take on these forms, and those forms fill out to make the standing scalar wave grids. These grids then accrete more of that consciousness coming in from source and keeps organizing it along the mathematical pattern, going from units or wave patterns into combinations of wave patterns into three-dimensional wave patterns. Now here's a word that's really important as we begin to enter the realm of high science. High science isn't what's practiced here on the planet right now, so you don't have to worry about dealing with the science here at the moment. Kilans. The word kilans refers to these grids that pull in more of the consciousness of source and begin to organize it in three-dimensional sets, where you would have one group of scalar waves, say, going on this rhythm, another group going on this rhythm, and another group going on this rhythm, where you have three different rhythms of scalar waves turning on and off, of Partakai units phasing. Now in a minute we're going to talk about Partakai phasing. What the concept of Partakai phasing means. They phase. They pass from Partakai units and then they break apart into their next phase to become Partakai and Partakam, which goes from antimatter to make antimatter and matter, and then they phase back and go back into their original Partakai antimatter unit. So phasing is really the turning on and off of the light bulbs. When the light bulb is off, it's in Partakai state. When the light bulbs turn on, they go into Partakam and Partakai matter and antimatter states. So the hologram flashes on here, flashes off there. This is the oscillation state, that's the vibration state. As we go along, we'll learn that these things that are actually one-dimensional to begin with become two-dimensional grids and then three-dimensional grids, and the thing that makes a difference between dimensions is the flashline sequence, the Partakai phasing rhythm. If they all went on the same rhythm, which means all the light bulbs flashed on at once and then flashed off at once, you'd have a one-dimensional reality field. You would not be able to perceive a three-dimensional hologram. What allows a three-dimensional hologram to be created is the fact that Partakai units are broken down into different mathematical programs. One is told to flash this often, another is told to flash this often, another is told to flash this often. This means there are sets of three rhythms. Okay? You have one rhythm that'll create one frequency of dimension, one dimension. Okay? One flashline rhythm, which is flashline is that line of light bulbs, how often it will turn off and on and in what sequence. You have another one that will create another dimension, another one that will create another dimension. That's called the flashline sequence. That's the flashline of the Partakai phasing, when they go from antimatter Partakai to Partakam and Partakai and back again. So it's really light bulb or standing wave turning off and on. How fast it's going to do that in relation to its neighbors. Because this is a grid. There's bunches of scalar waves. So what you have is bunches of scalar waves turn on and off at different rhythms in sets of three different rhythms. The sets of three different rhythms allow an effect to be created where the units of consciousness that continue to be fed in from source, from God, enter the three different rhythms and they begin to fill out on the single-dimensional Partakai grid. They begin to fill out, first becoming two-dimensional and then three-dimensional. They crystallize. They form crystallized units of consciousness. They form kilans. Chelons are the next step in the building blocks of matter. It goes from single-dimensional particle units into two-dimensional particle and particum, which form grids, and that goes into chelons. Now again, we're talking about standing light waves, light and sound waves. But at this point, they're crystallized waves, where they're actually waves that turn off and on, but they have a crystalline, three-dimensional crystalline form. This is why we can experience three-dimensional reality. They each have a different relationship to each other. It's not just how often those lights are going to sequence or turn off and on. It's what angle, if you have one line going this way, what angle is the next line coming through if you have three lines, flash lines, three lines turning on and off at different rhythms. It's not just the different rhythm, but it's also what angular relationship exists between each of those lines. It's like if you were going to draw it on a piece of paper. One line goes this way, one line goes this way, and one line goes this way. So you have three different angles of intersection that allow the units of consciousness of source to pass through, become particle and particle and particum, go into the particle grids. Is the three angles of intersection as well as how fast they flash on and off that allow the crystallization of three-dimensional matter to occur. Okay, yes?
There's some distortion.
Is this distorting? I'm sorry, what's it doing?
Sounds like the battery.
That fixed. Thank you very much for the quick return on the battery there. All right, so we talked about particle, particle, and particum, the basic units of consciousness that begin to build up and accrete or pull together to form the structures that will be the building blocks and the foundations of matter, the matter templates. We went from particle, particle, particum to groups of them that form standing scalar wave grids, particle grids, that have a relationship of three different flashing on and off rhythms and three different angles of intersection that create chelons, which are crystallized scalar wave patterns. They are still fixed, but they are chelons, as opposed to chelons are three-dimensional, solidified crystallizations that begin to create energy fields around and within themselves that allow for the holographic projection process to begin. Okay, we go to the next one, please. What am I doing? 47? What am I doing? Okay. Now, we're going to talk about the structure of dimensions, which is totally interwoven with what we were just talking about as far as scalar wave grids, particle, particle, and particum, flashing off at different rhythms of flash to each other. Now, what is a dimension? In traditional terms, dimension, the word dimension, is used really to describe other characteristics of a something else that's a noun. Like you have dimensions of consciousness. You have a dimension of this, like you're measuring something. This house has this dimensions. We use dimension in terms of it is a specific noun. It is an ism. It is a thing unto itself. Okay. Now when we talk about dimensions, these points help us to understand what they are. The unified field, which is the unified field, the scalar grid of the universe, the unified field of energy, is built upon dimensionalized sets of scalar standing wave points, wave strata. What does that mean? It means dimensionalized sets, I'll get into that in a minute, of the scalar standing wave grids. Now they are dimensionalized. Down here we'll get into what does dimensionalized mean. It means that each set has a different flash line rhythm and a different angle of intersection. So technically, we have a 15-dimensional system. Those 15 dimensions are broken down into sets of 3 dimensions each, giving us 5 systems with 3 dimensions each, 5 3-dimensional systems. A dimension is one flash line sequence. To keep it simple, if you think in terms of the light bulbs, a line of light bulbs turning off and on, and you have, let's say, a whole piece of plywood with 100 light bulbs on it, but they all have their nice little orderly rows. One dimension would be one flash line sequence. It would have its own rhythm. Let's say they flash on and off at this rate. It would have its own rhythm. That is a flash line. Now, you put 3 flash lines together, and you get a 3-dimensional system. So one dimension is one flash line sequence. It has its own rhythm, its own pulsation rate. The rhythm would be the pulsation rate of how energy moves in and out through that system. One dimension would also be the flash line sequence that the next one up is built on. The next one up would actually include that. As if you have one row of light bulbs, then the next row, that'd be your dimension 2, you have 2 rows that equal the 1. The next one, you'd have 3 rows that equal the 1. So dimensions, flash line sequences, build on each other. When you get, if you want to look at the mathematics of it, dimension 1 would have 12 light bulbs. Okay? And they would flash on and off at a slow rhythm, let's say. Dimension 2 would have 24 light bulbs, and they would flash on and off a little faster. Dimension 3 would have 36, and they'd flash on and off even faster. If you take that all the way up, the 15-dimensional scale, what you are getting is 5 sets of 3 flash line sequences, each sequentially moving faster. So dimension 1, 2, and 3 would have the slowest combined rhythm, flash line rhythm, which is the Partakai phasing rhythm. Dimensions 4, 5, and 6 would go together, and they would have the next faster. They'd be faster than the one below it, but not as fast as the next 3 above it. This is creating a framework in which 5 separate reality fields coexist in the same space. They're only separated by the rhythm of flash, of their scalar waves, and by the angle of intersection between those light bulb lines. There's a 90-degree shift, or 90-degree angle of intersection between each of the 3, which translates into a 90-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin. Angular rotation of particle spin, mouthful. What that means is, by the time all this gets into manifest matter particles, flash line number 1, 2, and 3 are each going to create particles in the manifest world, subatomic particles and those kind of things, that have a specific angle of spin rotation. Now, science will tell us that subatomic particles and those kind of things spin. They move. They appear to move, have a spin rate, and they have a spin angle. Some are at different angles. We see in this reality field, what science can see under a microscope, are a very limited set of angular rotation of particle spins that fit within dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Between dimension 1 and 2, there's actually a 90-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin, which means a particle in dimension 1 be here with its axis like this. Okay? There'd be a 90-degree shift in dimension 2 and a 90-degree shift in dimension 3. So they're all interfacing at a different angle. This is what allows light and sound units, scalar waves, standing waves, to bend in a way that creates like a lens effect. The lens effect creates a system of energy structures that we'll talk about soon. They're called Hoover bodies that are circular, actually elliptical, kind of like spherical elliptical spheres of energy that begin the process of taking these grids, these flashline sequences of Partakai, Partakai, and Partakam and chelons, taking them from scalar wave form into the illusion of holographically projected matter. It's as if we're all sitting in a bubble of energy. A spherical bubble of energy is around us, and consciousness moves through, takes the content of what's inside of us, and projects it out on the screen, just like a projector in a movie theater would, except the screen is round, and it's all around us. It's like being in one of those dome theaters where everything around you is like coming at you, the image is at you. Our bodies are actually serving as the holographic projector vehicle. Our DNA is a holographic template. What's in there becomes literally what we see before our eyes, which means, in broad terms, right now the fact that you're seeing me and that I'm seeing all of you implies that we're encoded in each other's DNA. Interesting concept, isn't it? It means you cannot walk any place and go anywhere and see anything that doesn't belong to you in your DNA. It may be something you don't want there. You would not be able to see, as an outside reality field, something that was not in your holographic template. So we begin to understand, and it takes a while. There's a lot of pieces to this to understand really what in the world are we seeing when we walk around. You know, it helps for a while. I used to do this exercise, and it's not one that has a step 1, step 2, step 3. It's kind of like a conceptual one. I used to say, okay, when I was trying to digest this stuff and really get a handle on experiencing what that meant, I would sit in a room very quietly, I'd kind of slow my breathing right down and get toward like alpha brainwave state and mellow myself out and then say, all right, this is a hologram. Right now, everything I see before me is like a Kodak snapshot of what's in my DNA right there. Let me feel this reality. It takes a while, but if you play with that, you can do it anywhere. You can do it on the bus if you're good at blocking out distraction of sound and stuff around you. You start to get a feeling of, oh my God, I'm manufacturing this moment. There's a place where you can actually feel it to start to happen. If you play with that idea enough and get out of your own way mentally, we're saying, oh, I can't do that. Is that really true? If you stop the mental chatter and just focus on, I want to know my Kodak moment now. I want to feel it. I want to feel it. I'm making this. Wow, I'm creating this. And if it's a bad one, if it's a lousy moment, and you're having like really yucky stuff, say, my goodness, look how good I am at creating stuff. I'm creating a real mess right now. This is where you start to own your hologram, where you begin to realize life is not inflicting itself on you. You may be experiencing things you don't want to experience because your DNA template's running rampant right through you, and you don't realize you're creating it. It doesn't mean, oh, I must be terrible or really stupid because I'm creating this mess. It means there's something I need to fix in my DNA template if I want to make this better and I don't like what's out here. But there's a lot of people, most of the world, will look at the world and say, oh, I'm being victimized. The world's treating me terribly. It's treating me bad. It's your fault. It's your fault. You did it. You made it happen. You're victimizing me. As long as you're in that space, you will be a victim forever. I don't care if you're a Holocaust victim. You are still part of a mass drama that your DNA is carrying something that put you in that hologram. It doesn't mean you're bad or you deserve it. Just because you're the one manufacturing it at the moment doesn't mean, well, there, you deserve it. That's what a lot of people I've met actually do. There's some belief systems teach this stuff. Oh, well, it's your karma, so, don't bother me with it. I don't feel sorry for you. These can be the most obnoxious people because they don't have any compassion for anybody, as if they were doing any better, right? What did they do when something goes wrong in their world? Why me? What's wrong with my world? I guess it's my karma. What do I do with that? I don't know, right? They start to learn compassion by that. We need to realize that we have the ability to begin manifesting what we desire. But first we have to own everything we're creating. We are creating everything we see around us, every event we have, both personally and as a part, if we're a part of a mass drama. Like the mess we're moving into now with the war against terrorism. Oh boy. Talk about mass projections happening. We will first become empowered if, no matter how lousy it is out there, if we can say, the part of this that I'm experiencing in my life, just for the fact that I'm a part of it, if I can recognize this is my hologram, the next question is, oh my God, what's in my DNA? And how do I get it out of there fast? Right? You don't beat up on yourself for not creating it the way you want it. That doesn't help either. If we can realize that the reason we've had such a hard time as a race creating what we would desire to see are because of the DNA distortions that chop up the different levels of consciousness. So we forgot how to communicate with the rest of ourselves. We're like creation machines running rampant. And on the subconscious level, we're creating a bunch of stuff that's creating misery for ourselves and for the planet. It's been going on for thousands of years. There's not any one person to blame, and blame is useless. If we can realize that this is the problem, we're a part of a mass problem. It's not just you that's messing up your hologram. We're all doing it really well. It shows you your creative potential, though. If you can create a hologram that's a mess, you can change your mind and create one that's nice. So that's where you start to own your power. Most of the world is perfectly willing to say, it's their fault. Let's go blow them up. Let's blame them. Let's put them away. And the victim-victimizer game goes on and on and on, as it has for 25,000 years and more. The way to break that cycle is to realize whatever side of the victim-victimizer game you end up playing doesn't change the fact that you're in that game is part of your hologram, part of what you've manifested. So in beginning to understand the core things of the fact that we're in a dimensionalized universe system that means our consciousness is taking on the form of standing scalar waves that are adopting a primal order form. The order form is a very specific mathematical program, and it's a very simple one, really. A mathematical program that says there are 15 different rhythms of flash that will go together in groups of 3, and each 3 of those will intersect with each other at a different angle, a 90-degree angle of intersection. That is the format we're in. Yeah, we can put that on there now. Good. Go for it. What that creates, what those 15 different flash line sequence creates, and no, you're not going to see this if you go out into outer space. It's not hanging out there in the sky. Think about it. That's our hologram too. We're sending machines out into the hologram to see space, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a hologram. That gets mind-boggling after a while. It's like, who's creating that one? Stores. No, but there is no God. We all started with a Big Bang. Yeah, right. Yeah. Science can go in loops. Now, this is a key and core diagram that we use throughout all of the Inner Templar and Planetary Templar teachings. It is a diagram that's meant to show you, to conceptualize for you, the relationship of a 15-dimensional system. The core structure, or the core template that the universe, the manifest universe, is built upon are sets of 15-dimensional systems. One set of 15-dimensional systems, one set of 15 dimensions is called a time matrix. Now, a time matrix is interesting because it doesn't just hang up there in the sky and we came from elsewhere and went into it to get into time. It's about expansion and contraction, the breathing rhythm of consciousness and of source. All of this is why I look at some of the teachings that have evolved or de-evolved down the road, where God's out there someplace away from us. It is impossible. Because first you have source consciousness, God. It is intelligent, it thinks, it creates on purpose. It is an it because it is beyond form manifestation, which means it's beyond genderization. Genderization is an aspect of polarization rather than unification. God is not genderized. God is not physicalized, other than it's my millions and billions and eons of expressions as us and plants and animals and trees and galaxies. They are the body of God. But the consciousness of God exists first and foremost. The consciousness of God and the identity of God chose to create a hologram arena where it could get to know itself and experience all sorts of things. God is getting to know itself repeatedly over and over, and always will, through the myriad of manifestations that it is able to create. First you have source. That would be out here, okay? Going off the edge of the paper, limitless, boundless, but it's an energy field, okay? Consciousness field. Within that consciousness field, there are first levels of creation that are not quite dimensionalized yet. Before it goes into a standing pattern of light waves that flash off and on, it is first a standing pattern of sound units, which are units of vibration that are actually pre-sound. It's called primal sound. There's an old saying that in the beginning was the word, was the sound, was the vibration. God first contracts part of its consciousness to form a standing sound vibration field. Within that primal sound vibration field, which are units of potential particle. They're particle of a form, but they're not the kind that flash on and off yet. They're in a perpetual off position or vibration position, so they don't oscillate and go into light yet. They are stationary sound, but they are also units of consciousness, of conscious awareness. That template of primal sound holds the identity levels of God that are called the Ascended Master levels. Now, every individual being, every individual anything that has come down into manifestation to experience the hologram, it implies that they have a family of consciousness or a set pattern of primal sound fields that they came through when they came out of God and came through that. You didn't go away from God. You went into God deeper. Remember, God is here. This is inside, like a little area of your mind that you put over here like a file. You know how the internet works and the computers work? We have an electromagnetic domain over here. Okay, you're going to use that as one field. Then you want to flip to another screen where you have other fields. Well, you could conceptualize it this way. You have the consciousness of Source. And a small piece of that consciousness of Source decided to create manifestation to know itself in that way. So it created the primal sound field. and the ascended master levels of consciousness that are forever. They're eternal gestalts of consciousness. There are 24 primal ones of those that form time matrices. Now, the numbers have to do with the mathematics, the mathematical arrangement that was used, just like computer programs are built on mathematical arrangements. Most computer programs here are based on a base 10 math system, the 10, 20, 30. The source creation was based as a base 12 creation pattern, which means it's built on increments of 12, 24, 36, 48, all the way up the scale. So we have primal sound fields. The primal sound fields are called the energy matrix. And they are in this diagram. The area is represented by here. So we have source. The first contraction, where source contracted its boundless self into a small area that it could begin to create within. Primal sound fields. There are 3 levels. The first contraction, which is the closest level to source. This would be the last level you'd pass through, going out completely into at one with source when you completely demanifest. The first is the ecstatic level. That's the first contraction. After you have God, then contraction within God. Next is the polaric level. Next contraction in. Next is the triadic level. Next contraction in. This is where that's set, the beginning mathematical pattern for what becomes the trinities of dimensions in the light fields. This is where they're set, in the primal sound fields. This is where the rhythms of what becomes Partakai phasing, the flashing on and off, is set within the primal sound fields. And these things aren't things that were just created once and then went away. These are perpetually refueled through pulses of consciousness that come from source into those expansion and contraction levels. First it contracts into sound. Then source expands within its contraction. And here, actually starts up here in the diagram. It starts up here. These are actually circles and circles and circles and circles. Here, dimensions 15, 14, and 13. They represent the first expansion within the contraction. So you have God contracts, and within its contraction, it made a little domain, it will expand its energy again. This is where the primal light fields exist. They're called the Kirishe, which we'll talk about later as we progress. The Kirishe primal light fields of dimensions 13, 14, and 15. These are where the beginning of Partakai phasing starts. These are the 3 original rhythms where these 3 levels of vibration start to turn on into oscillation. So these are the areas. They actually don't flash on and off yet. Here they're in their off state. Here they're perpetually in their on state. So in dimensions 13, 14, and 15, you have stationary primal light fields that never shut off. And as you expand out from them towards source, then that's where they shut off in their primal sound. And then beyond that is full expansion into source, where you're out of the manifestation framework completely. So you have the primal sound arena energy matrix. The primal light field, now dimension 13, 14, and 15 correspond to these levels. This becomes important when you begin working with the Ascendant Master issues and with the higher dimensional currents or the higher frequency currents. The ecstatic level, which is the closest level to source, that's where you would have your most information. That is where you would have your highest level of consciousness. If you met somebody that was a D15 embodied Ascendant Master, that means D15 doesn't go with here, it goes with here. All right, now there's a trick here that happens. These are expansions of these. But there's a process of this. If you were coming up the dimensional scale to ascend, if you wanted to ascend and start this way, you go through D13, 14, 15, full expansion, you have to contract back down to D13 to get back up to here, the ecstatic level. D13 goes with the ecstatic level. It is a slower oscillation, which means if you think in the terms of, okay, we're moving from sound into light, which would be oscillation. We're moving from no oscillation into oscillation. No oscillation, moving into oscillation. The first step, which would be the slowest rhythm that would start the process of moving into light, would be D13. And then the next step would be 14, which would move faster. The next step would be 15, which would move faster. So you actually have to expand all the way up to here and then slow down again to get back out, to do the contraction, to get back out into the primal sound fields. Now, they call these the primal light fields, and there are three primal frequency currents. You have the blue flame, the violet flame, and the gold flame. The flame refers to the primal standing light fields. D13, that corresponds with the acadic level of the sound matrix, is the blue flame light field. And it's out of that blue flame light field that the other two come. The gold is D14, and the violet is D15. Violet is actually a magenta pink color, but they call it the violet flame. The blue is actually a blue turquoisey color, very pale. They're very pale, like pastel-y colors. And D14, they call it the gold, but it's actually a very pale yellow. So these are the primal light fields. When we get into the end of Kathara 2 stuff, where we're getting into Vecca codes, we are going to be dealing with the mathematical programs that correspond to these and these in order to reprogram the parts of ourselves that correspond to these dimensional fields. I get excited when I think about it, because the currents that we're being trusted to learn to run again are awesome. The consciousness level that goes with them is awesome. It's a gift that's being brought back to this planet after many thousands of years of its absence. So I get excited when I talk about them. But we went from the Partakai units, flashing on and off little units of consciousness, form Partakai grids. Partakai grids form kilons. They all form standing scalar wave patterns. They have different flash line sequences that form dimensions. The dimensions group into sets of 3 that creates what's called a harmonic or a harmonic universe. Now, this is where the patterns for the 3-dimensional setup are mathematically held always. These are the primal fields that nothing can touch and mess up. When we get into here, from D13, 14, and 15, that's called harmonic universe 5. That is the universe of matter density that's called antimatter. This is the first stage, the light field, where form possibility begins to happen. How they have that wild light radiation gas. Everything starts in that form, and it's spherical. We all start, everything starts as sons of antimatter energy. That's our first beginning of individuation into form, from being a common form of primal sound and source. All right, so we have the antimatter density level starts here at harmonic universe 5. From there, a thought form of God passes into manifestation next, into what's called harmonic universe 4. That's composed of 3 flashline sequences, dimension 10, 11, and 12. The 12 is the highest frequency one, has the fastest flashline. The 11 is the next one, a little bit slower. And 10 is a little bit slower than that. That is another 3-dimensional reality field. That creates what is called prematter, liquid light, hydroplasm. The hydroplasmic field. It is when the gas field starts to slow down a little, just like when water vapor begins to turn back into water, pourable water. So down in here, in dimensions 10, 11, and 12, are the primal light field, primal prematter fields. The Christos liquid light field is considered fully this one, the D12 level. This is where your divine blueprint gets set, where before everything, no matter what it was, be it a bug, a planet, or a person, started out as a ball of flaming gas up in the primal light fields. It's now going to start to take on form differentiation according to whatever that original thought was, that when it was God up here, when it was still home up here, decided it wanted to be a so-and-so, so it put the pattern of the so-and-so here, then here. Now it's going to solidify the pattern. It's going to go from gas or water vapor type stuff down into liquid light. This is where you get the liquid light fields. Here is where your first imprint, your perfect form, is perpetually and always mathematically encoded within the universal template. Every being that passes into manifestation leaves its imprint here. That's its prematter divine blueprint. It's the divine blueprint because it's the part that came directly from the original intention. When the being was at one with Source, it made that intention. It was going to be in that form, in that time-space area. It was going to do this when it was there. Had that decision here. And it put itself through primal sound and primal light. And this was its first template, almost like a clay template. You could look at it as like liquid clay, where an impression was put there. And from that impression, the manifest form is going to densify. Now, this is a little bit, harmonic universe 4, pre-matter, is a little bit more dense in terms of matter than the gaseous state of the liquid light, the gaseous light fields of the primal light fields in D13, 14, and 15 harmonic 5. Now, you have the template set here. The D12 level, which is connected to the D13 level, and remember D13 is the most powerful one of all because it's connected, light field, because it's connected to the ecstatic sound field, which is connected directly to source. D12 can't be altered in the sense of destroying of a divine blueprint. It is always held in the connection with its D13 contraction point. There's a static that happens there that holds every divine blueprint perfect, no matter how much deviation may take place down here. But deviation can take place from 11.5 down, which means halfway up into the 12th dimension, you can start to have differentiation from what the original divine blueprint was. What this means, too, is when you're dealing with things like channeling and talking to beings that are out there somewhere that you don't know where they're coming from, a lot of people think just in the D4 astral plane is where the nasties are. But higher is always better. That's not true, because you can have messed up people in all sorts of different forms hanging out at D11.5. They're called D11 dark avatars. All right? So the universe is a much bigger place than we've remembered in a very long time. This structure, and beginning to understand the structure here, is the beginning of our wake-up call. So we begin to remember where we are. There's some responsibility that comes with this knowing as well, as far as a lot of people think, oh, well, you know, it's all safe and it's all perfect and nothing can ever harm me and the angel told me so and the angel's looking out for me. Good luck. Check the angel's resume, because you don't know where he's coming from. There's some nice angels out there. But the thing is, if you remember that you're an angel, you don't need an angel to fix it for you. You're supposed to be responsible for it yourself. This is one of the little tricks in the New Age movement that's happening. Oh, just give it to that angel or this one or that ascended master over there. They'll fix it for you, poor little pathetic thing. That's an insult, hate to tell you. You're avatars, and they're telling you you need like a D5 angel to fix it for you. This is part of the trickery that's going on, because this structure has not been taught in so long. People don't know what they're talking to. They start channeling, they have things come in. You can't tell if it's good, bad, or awful until you understand what the structure is, where you fit into the structure. Then you can start to, first of all, realize, I don't need something to run my life up there for me because I'm up there too. If something says, I'm an archangel and I'm better than you because I'm an archangel, you better listen to me. You say, excuse me, I'm an avatar. You know, like when you're going to grow up, you know. The intimidation factor that is so often used here to control and manipulate people by things coming in and communicating, you know, you can call them demons, you can call them angels, but saying, you are a poor, pathetic little race, you're a poor little sinner animal species down here. You know, God sends the angels to take care of you. We were the angels God sent to take care of the animals. We're being conned because our memory banks have been wiped out through the DNA. So as we learn these structures, we're going to reclaim the ability to look any angel, archangel, or other avatar in the face and say, excuse me, why are you trying to take my power? Don't you have your own? A being that asks you to worship it is sorely in need of stealing your power for some reason. And if it is truly a being that is of a high order, it has its own power. It doesn't need to steal yours. So it wouldn't want you to worship it. God doesn't want worship. God wants you to know your worth as a face of God and wants you to co-create in loving creation. That's what God wants. The books were changed by certain types of beings, we call them fallen angelics, who came in and decided, because they can't access the primal currents anymore, because they can't pull them into their bodies anymore, they've learned to energy vampire off other life forms and other systems. They try to get other beings to hand their power over. So they can literally tap into your primal life force currents, into your biofields, into your chakras, and start feeding themselves off your energy, which messes up your DNA even more. These are some of the tricks that are being run in the New Age movement. And if in the Templar workshop, we'll get heavily into what's really going on there. But even in this workshop, it's useful to know that you don't need to get caught up in any of that stuff if you realize this structure is the internal structure that you're built on, as well as the universe, and this is the series of energy circulation and consciousness circulation between God and anything manifest. It implies that you exist within God to begin with. God isn't away from you. You are within God. You can't be away from God. You can only be forgetting that you're a part of God. And you can be stuck in a body whose DNA isn't letting that cognition and frequency of consciousness to come through. You can open up that connection to God by opening up the primal life force currents, which are the currents of consciousness that God sends to feed the time matrix, to feed all of us here. You can open those in your body, and that's what Kathara healing is about. Learning to bring that potential back to our race, which was the original potential of our divine blueprint. So we have, up here, the primal light fields, primal sound fields, primal light fields, pre-matter template fields with the divine blueprint at D12 level. This is the pre-matter. Now from pre-matter, matter starts to get a little more solid. Starts to crystallize a little more, and forms is here. Up here, forms are neat. In D12, did you ever see the Terminator movie where they had that silver guy that looked like he was made out of mercury, like liquid mercury? Well, that is kind of what you can conceptualize that reality field as being like. We all have an image of ourselves where we all look the same, actually, at that level, as pale silver liquid light beings, our silver self, our Christos self. That self is always with us and around us. And when we begin to work with Kathara healing, we begin to open that frequency within our body. Later, once we heal our DNA templates, we can actually move this body energy and the particles it's composed of into that self and demanifest and remanifest someplace else. These are the potentials that we have. Now, when we get from pre-matter, liquid light,